So we'll take up the discussion on the next important dimension of cooperative federalism, the experience of India with respect to cooperative federalism. So what happened to the idea of cooperative federalism in the last 6 to 7 decades? So the period from 1950 till now can be broadly categorized into three phases: 1950 to 1989. See, from 1950 to 1989, the phase is dominated by the Indian National Congress, a strong national political party in the form of Indian National Congress, and the absence of strong regional political parties. See, from 1989 up to 2014, the era of coalition governments, the rise of strong regional political parties. Post 2014, re-emergence of the governments are dominated by single party at the national level, but speaking the language of cooperative federalism. So if you take the period from 1950 to 1989, this period has witnessed excessive centralization, over-centralization. See, post-independence, in most of the states as well as at the national level, Indian National Congress was very much dominant. So the constitution functioned more like a unitary constitution rather than federal constitution. So there was no real autonomy for the state governments. The union government was dictating terms to the state governments because the same political party was in power at the union level as well as in most of the state governments. So in the first phase up to 1989 from 1950, because of the strong domination of one national political party, that is Indian National Congress, at the national level and in most of the state governments, there was no real idea of cooperative federalism. Thus, constitution worked more like a unitary constitution rather than federal constitution. The autonomy of the states is not respected. The autonomy of the states was always under serious threat. But post 1989, so up to 1989, dominance of Indian National Congress party, and there were no strong regional political parties. And in addition to this period also witnessed the rampant misuse of Article 356. It's not only by the Congress party, even the non-Congress governments in the period before 1989 have rampantly misused Article 356. So that's the experience of Indian federalism. So Indian federalism was seriously strained before 1989 on one hand because of domination of one political party working in the unitary style, and then misuse of Article 356 by the governments at the national level rampantly before 1989. In addition to this, I told you that in 1975, Mrs. Indira Gandhi invoked Article 352, declared internal emergency, and has affected the autonomy of the state governments from 1975 to 77. So the period before 1989 also witnessed the misuse of emergency powers under Article 352. In addition to this, the Planning Commission, which is abolished in 2014, it worked more in a centralized manner. The states are not represented in the Planning Commission, and there was no enough opportunity for the state governments to ventilate their grievances and to express their opinions on important matters in the Planning Commission because the states do not have any representation in the Planning Commission. The centralized nature of the working of Planning Commission also affected the idea of federalism and cooperative federalism for a long time till 2014. Then, as I told you, the framers of the Indian Constitution have created vertical imbalances, and the central government has got more revenue raising capacity. The states are virtually dependent on the central government for finances. So taking this as an advantage, the union government tried to dictate terms to the state governments up to 1989. But under post 1989, because of the emergence of strong regional political parties at the national level, for forming the government at the national level, the support of the regional political parties became very important. See, post 1989, because of the emergence of strong regional political parties, it became necessary for the support of the regional political parties to form the governments at the national level. See, from 1989 up to 2014, at the national level, we had coalition governments. and the survival of the coalition governments depended on the support of the state political parties. So this is the phase where we see the remarkable maturing of Indian federalism. The misuse of Article 356 has come down greatly because the center is very much dependent on the regional political parties. Any attempt made by the central government to misuse Article 356 was severely resisted by the regional political parties, and the central government has kept away from misusing Article 356 for the fear of losing the support of the regional political parties for a continued survival at the national level. In addition to this, the role played by the Indian Supreme Court also was an important example for maturing of Indian federalism. In 1994, in S.R. Bommai versus Union of India case, a 9-judge bench of the Indian Constitution held that federalism is not a matter of administrative convenience. It is a principle. Federalism, not a matter of administrative convenience, but one of the principle. In other words, by the time the Indian Supreme Court gave its judgment in S.R. Bommai case on Article 356, we had the recommendations of Sarkaria Commission. Sarkaria Commission is the first commission on central-state relations appointed in 1983. It gave the report in 1987. So Sarkaria Commission had several important recommendations for preventing the misuse of Article 356. All the important recommendations of Sarkaria Commission for preventing the misuse of Article 356, they became part of the judgment of the Indian Supreme Court in 1994 in S.R. Bommai case. So S.R. Bommai versus Union of India 1994, the judgment of the Indian Supreme Court has led to greatly reducing the misuse of Article 356. See, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar wanted Article 356 to remain as a dead letter, which means he wanted it to be used only in the compelling situations. In fact, it was made a dead letter by the Indian Supreme Court through its judgment in 1994 in S.R. Bommai case. Of course, despite the judgment of Supreme Court in S.R. Bommai case in 1994, in the recent past, in the state of Uttarakhand, in the state of Arunachal Pradesh, Article 356 was misused by the present government, resulting in the dismissal of the concerned state governments, which are restored to power by the intervention of the Indian Supreme Court. So the misuse of Article 356 has not totally been eliminated, but the misuse has greatly come down because of the judgment of the Indian Supreme Court. So in S.R. Bommai case, the Supreme Court said the confidence which a particular government enjoys in the lower house or not has to be decided on the floor of the house, not in the Raj Bhavan, the official residence of the governor. And then the Supreme Court also said the state legislative assembly cannot be dissolved unless the parliament gives its approval for the precedent rule. Remember, the precedent rule which is imposed in any particular state has to get the approval of the Indian parliament within 2 months. So there were instances before 1994 judgment that even before the parliament gave its approval to the precedent rule, the state legislative assemblies were dissolved. But the Indian Supreme Court said the state legislatures must not be dissolved. They can be only suspended. If the parliament doesn't give approval, then the governments can be reactivated. In addition to this, the Janata Party in 1978 through the 44th Amendment to the Indian Constitution has allowed the power of judicial review on the imposition of precedent rule. So before 1974 judgment, the power of the Union government to advise the President of India to impose precedent rule in a particular state was thought to be beyond the judicial scrutiny. But in 1994 S.R. Bommai judgment, the Supreme Court has clarified the decision of the Union government to impose precedent rule in a particular state, whether the basis for the imposition of precedent rule in a particular state, whether it is bona fide or mala fide, can be looked into by the judiciary. In other words, the Indian Supreme Court held that the power of judicial review will extend to the basis for imposition of precedent rule in a particular state. So 44th Amendment to the Indian Constitution in 1978, way back, said that Article 356 is subjected to judicial review. The same was reiterated by the Indian Supreme Court for S.R. Bommai judgment. So the basis for the imposition of precedent rule, whether it is on mala fide intent or bona fide intent, can be looked into by the Indian Supreme Court. That was what was declared by the Indian Supreme Court in S.R. Bommai judgment. In other words, the active role of the Indian Supreme Court, the rise of regional political parties, and the emergence of coalition governments led to the strengthening of Indian federalism and the promotion of the idea of cooperative federalism. And again, as I told you, in 1990, the National Front government on the recommendations of the Sarkaria Commission has provided for the establishment of Interstate Council, as a forum for resolving the issues which are common to the central and state governments. Remember, it's not only the recommendation of Sarkaria Commission. In one of the important cases which went before the Indian Supreme Court, Dabur India Limited versus Union of India versus State of Uttar Pradesh. Dabur India Limited versus State of Uttar Pradesh. Even in this case, the Supreme Court advised the central and state governments to take the support of interstate council for resolving the issues which are common to the center and the states instead of coming to the See, the Supreme Court of India is a overburdened institution. If any matter which is an issue between the center and the states is taken to the Supreme Court of India, it will take pretty long time for resolving such a dispute. So, in Dabur India Limited versus State of Uttar Pradesh, the Supreme Court advised the central and state governments to take recourse to interstate council for resolving the issues which are common to the center and state governments. And these are the things which led to, and remember when P.V. Narasimha Rao was the Prime Minister of India, he had the habit of making all party meetings for any important issue when a decision has to be taken. He was responsible for conciliatory politics. This was because of his government being a minority government. So in general, from 1989 to 2014, you see the autonomy for the state governments being respected and the voice of the state governments respected. Strong regional political parties prevented the misuse of Article 356, and then the states had got a greater leeway in the national government from 1989 to 2014. But in the general elections to 2014, BJP went before the electorate with the slogans Team India and Cooperative Federalism. So the terms Team India and Cooperative Federalism were part of the BJP party political manifesto, and also they were the slogans of electoral campaign by the BJP. So after the BJP came to power in 2014, it emerged as the single largest political party with an absolute majority in the lower house, that is Lok Sabha. BJP could form the government on its own without the support of any other political party. You see the re-emergence of single party dominant governments from 2014. But because of coalition dharma, BJP also gave portfolios to its coalition partners. But otherwise, BJP is no more dependent on any political party for forming the government at the national level. It has got absolute majority on its own. You see the re-emergence of stable government at the national level dominated by a single political party having absolute majority in the lower house. Despite the re-emergence of single party government at the national level, Modi was speaking the language of Team India and Cooperative Federalism. See, from 1950 to 1989, we have seen excessive centralization, over-centralization. 1989 to 2014, weak governments at the national level, excessive regionalization. But it was believed that from 2014, after the BJP came to power under the Prime Ministership of Narendra Modi, there could be a possible balance between over-centralization and over-regionalization. And this balance could be made possible by Modi, that is the expectation from the present government. So that's about India's experience with the cooperative federalism.